Some of the scariest stories don't involve monsters or the supernatural. They involve people. This story was sent in by someone who moved into a cheap apartment after their divorce, only to discover they weren't as alone as they thought. What started with strange glances turned into something much darker. This is the story, of the man in apartment 3. I used to live in a small but decent apartment complex just outside of Chicago. It wasn't the nicest neighborhood, but I was 34, recently divorced, and needed to start over. So when I found a place with no credit check, cheap rent, and flexible lease terms, I didn't ask too many questions. That was my first mistake. The building was old, maybe 1960s, and had this permanent mildew smell in the hallway. My unit, 302, was on the 3rd floor. Just 2 doors down was apartment 304. I only mention that because from the very first week, something about that unit felt wrong. It wasn't the apartment itself, but the man who lived there. I first saw him on move-in day. He was standing in his doorway, staring at me. No smile, no nod, just watching. He had thinning grey hair, wore a bathrobe even though it was July, and his eyes were bloodshot like he hadn't slept in days. I tried to be polite. I nodded and said, "Hey." He didn't say anything back. Later that night, I saw him again, standing in the same spot, door cracked open just a few inches, still watching. I told myself maybe he was just weird. Every building has someone like that, right? But it didn't stop. Over the next few weeks, I'd hear him walking up and down the hallway at odd hours, like 2, 3 in the morning, slow steps, back and forth. Sometimes he'd just stand outside my door. I could see his shadow through the crack under the frame. I started sleeping with a chair propped under the knob. One night I opened my door quickly, trying to catch him in the act. He wasn't there, but taped to the wall right beside my door was a single Polaroid photo. It showed the inside of my apartment, taken from the outside through my living room window. My curtains had been partially open. The photo was blurry, but unmistakable. I checked every lock, every window. I was on the 3rd floor. How the hell did he get that shot? The landlord didn't care. He just shrugged and said the guy in 304 was probably harmless. That's when things started getting worse. After I found that Polaroid, I couldn't sleep right for days. I started closing all my blinds, double-checking every lock, even stacking boxes in front of the windows like makeshift barricades. My apartment wasn't just my home anymore. It felt like a trap I was living inside. A few nights later, I was watching TV around midnight when I heard something that made my skin crawl. It was breathing, not mine. It was coming from the vent on the wall behind my couch. I muted the TV, leaned in. I swear to God, I could hear it. Slow, heavy, wheezing breaths, like someone struggling to stay quiet but not doing a good job of it. I stood up and backed away slowly. I was too freaked out to even move the couch. I just stared at the vent. Then suddenly, something moved behind it. I jumped and grabbed a broomstick from the corner and jabbed it at the vent. The noise stopped. Nothing moved. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next day, I called a maintenance guy and told him something was wrong with my duct system. I left for work early just to get out of the apartment. When I came back, there was a note from maintenance on my kitchen counter. All vents clear, but you were right. Someone's unscrewed the inside panel between 302 and 304, sealed it again. My stomach dropped. I never told them anything about apartment 300. That night, I went down to the laundry room in the basement, a claustrophobic little space with flickering lights and 2 rusted machines that sounded like dying engines. While I waited for my clothes to dry, I sat on a bench, scrolling my phone. Then I heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps on the basement stairs. I turned. It was him, the man from 304. But this time, he wasn't in his bathrobe. He was wearing black, a hoodie, sweatpants, and gloves. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs and just stared at me. Not a word, just stood there. I got up slowly, pretending not to be scared out of my mind, and said, "Hey man, everything okay?" He didn't answer. He just turned and walked back up the stairs. I waited a full 10 minutes before going up. When I did, I didn't see him anywhere, but there were wet footprints leading from the stairs, directly to my apartment door. That was the first time I seriously thought about leaving, but I didn't, because I was broke and stupid. 2 nights after the basement incident, I came home from work to find my door unlocked. I never left it unlocked, ever. I stood there for a long time, heart racing, just staring at the handle. I pushed it open slowly, one hand still gripping my keys like a weapon. Inside, everything looked normal. Nothing was missing, but something was off. That awful feeling, like you're being watched. I did a full sweep, checked under the bed, the closet, the shower, even inside the kitchen cabinets. No one. Then I looked at my bedroom window, a faint fingerprint smudge on the inside of the glass, and on my nightstand. Another Polaroid. This time, it was a picture of me, sleeping. That was it. I called the police. They showed up 20 minutes later, took a report, and I told them everything. The man in 304, the photos, the breathing, the vent. They knocked on his door. No answer, but his door was unlocked too. They went in, and I followed behind them. What we found still gives me nightmares. The place was filthy. Walls stained yellow from years of smoking, trash piled up in corners, and on the floor of the living room, dozens of Polaroids scattered like playing cards. Every single one was of me. Some from outside my windows, some from the hallway, some from inside my apartment. One showed me brushing my teeth, another, me cooking dinner, and one, the worst one, me showering, taken from behind the shower curtain. But the most disturbing thing wasn't the photos. It was what they found behind the bookshelf in his living room, a vent panel, partially unscrewed, and behind it, a crawl space that connected our walls. He'd been watching me, living in that disgusting apartment, sneaking through the crawl spaces at night, taking pictures of me while I slept. They never caught him. Apartment 304 was abandoned. They said he left everything behind. ID, clothes, even food still on the stove, like he vanished. I moved out the next day, left half my stuff behind. To this day, I don't know his name. The cops said there was no record of him even renting the unit. No lease, no file. It was like he wasn't supposed to be there at all. But the worst part, last week, almost 2 years later, I moved into a new building in a different state, got a fresh start, and last night, I found something in my mailbox, a Polaroid, me, sleeping, in my new bedroom. If you've ever had a strange neighbor, this story might stay with you longer than you'd like. Some people live right next door, and you never really know who they are, or what they're capable of. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, asterisk. And if you've ever experienced something you still can't explain, send it in. Your story might be featured next, asterisk. Until then, lock your doors, check your vents, and sleep with one eye open, asterisk. Thanks for listening.